Hello, everyone. As geologists often begin, not with what's most beautiful, but with what people couldn't explain when their bodies started to change. My name is Alexander. It's a pleasure to have you here, especially those who understand that some changes in the body are too subtle to ignore. Today, we're not talking about healing stones. We're talking about the stones people held onto when they felt something was no longer right. And here's what makes this interesting. The number one stone on this list isn't rare, but the version people truly seek can range from a few dollars to thousands. So let me ask you, have you ever held a stone and felt like something about it wasn't normal, or noticed something changing before you could explain why? Because some of these stones didn't fix anything. They changed how people faced what was coming. If you feel like this is the beginning of something new, leave a comment. I like this video, so I know you're on this journey with me. Stay until the end to discover the number one stone. You might already have it, without realizing. And don't forget to subscribe. If you're busy, save this video, because this is a journey into stones you've probably never truly understood. And one more thing, if my voice feels uncomfortable to you, I sincerely apologize. I'll keep working to improve it. Now, before we get to the stone that reveals everything, we need to start with something quieter. Because when the body begins to fail, it doesn't collapse all at once. It starts subtly, small changes, easy to ignore. And that's exactly where this first stone appears. Not at the end, but at the moment just before things become obvious. Number 10. The one people turned to when they felt something was off, but couldn't prove it yet.
Top 30. Garnet, almandine. The stone that looks like royal blood, but costs less than you think. If you've ever seen a gemstone that looks like it belongs in a crown, deep red, dense, almost like frozen wine, then you already know garnet. And here's what most people don't realize. That royal look is often coming from one of the most common gemstone families on Earth. As an archaeology reporter, garnet is a stone I don't just see in jewelry stores. I see it in excavation photos, in burial goods, in trade route artifacts, in medieval rings recovered from soil that hasn't seen daylight for centuries. Because garnet wasn't just worn, it was used to signal status, long before diamonds became the default. The garnet most people buy today, especially the affordable red kind, is usually almandine garnet, and it comes from places that sound less like luxury and more like geology itself. India, Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, Brazil, and parts of the United States. In many of these regions, almandine forms inside metamorphic rock, stone that has been crushed, heated, and reshaped under pressure for millions of years. This is not a gemstone born from beauty. It's born from force. Unlike rarer gems, garnet is often mined through small open pits, river gravel deposits, and weathered rock zones. In places like India and Madagascar, miners frequently dig manually, wash sediment, and sort by hand, pulling garnet crystals from the concentrate like red fragments of something older than history. Industrial mining exists too, but the key detail is this. Garnet is abundant. That abundance is exactly why the price stays lower than the stone's appearance suggests. Almandine garnet is famous for its deep wine red, sometimes drifting into brownish red or cola red under warm indoor light. In photos, this can look shockingly similar to ruby, but in daylight, garnet often reveals a darker, heavier tone, less electric than ruby, but more mature, more serious. It's the kind of red that doesn't sparkle like fire, it glows like history. Naturally, garnet crystals often form as dodecahedrons, geometric shapes so clean they look manufactured. When cut for jewelry, almandine is usually shaped into oval, round, cushion, step cuts, and small calibrated stones for vintage-style rings. Because garnet takes a high polish, even average stones can look premium once set. Now, here's the truth that surprises most buyers. A typical garnet ring in the market can be around $30 to $120. Simple garnet pendants often sell around $25 to $80. Even stones in the 2 to 5 carat range can still be affordable depending on clarity and cut. Yes, Designer brands can push the final price higher, but the stone itself? It's one of the cheapest ways to get that old money red look. So garnet doesn't look expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it carries the visual language of power, deep red, weight, and historical authority. And that's why it earns the number 30 spot. Because it proves something uncomfortable. Sometimes the most luxurious-looking stones are the ones the earth makes far too easily. Top 29. Peridot, the green gem that looks like emerald until you learn where it comes from. Peridot is one of those gemstones that can fool you instantly. In the right lighting, it flashes a clean, fresh green that feels expensive, almost like a young emerald. And if you see it set in gold, it can look like a stone reserved for high-end collectors. But Peridot has one of the most unusual origins in the entire gemstone world. And once you understand that origin, the price suddenly makes sense. As an archaeology reporter, Peridot is a stone I've seen in museum cases long before I saw it in modern jewelry. It appears in ancient Egyptian finds, in trade-era ornaments, and in artifacts where the green color was treated like proof of divine protection. For centuries, people didn't just wear peridot, they treated it like a sacred green light in mineral form. Geographically, the most important peridot sources today include the San Carlos Apache Reservation in Arizona, the mountains of Pakistan, parts of China, Myanmar, Vietnam, and historically the island of Zabergad in the Red Sea, one of the oldest known peridot mining sites in human history. But here's the detail that makes peridot different. Peridot isn't formed in the crust like most gemstones. It forms deep in the Earth's mantle, inside a mineral called olivine. That means peridot is literally a piece of the planet's interior, pushed upward through volcanic activity. In some cases, it arrives at the surface inside basalt. In rare cases, peridot can even be found in meteorites, carried through space before it ever touches human hands. Mining peridot depends heavily on location. In Arizona, much of it is extracted from volcanic deposits in dry desert terrain, often through small-scale operations and hand sorting. In Pakistan, peridot is mined in harsh, mountainous conditions, sometimes at extreme altitude, where the stone is recovered from narrow veins and loose material after blasting or digging. In both cases, the process is less like luxury gemstone hunting and more like hard geology work. Color is where peridot earns its reputation. It ranges from yellow-green to olive-green, and the best stones show a vivid lime tone with minimal brown. But unlike emerald, peridot's green is naturally warmer. Under indoor lighting, it can look brighter and more expensive than it really is. Under sunlight, it often reveals a slightly golden undertone that gives it away. In shape, peridot is usually cut into oval, cushion, pear, and round stones. You'll also see it as small calibrated cuts for mass jewelry because it's relatively easy to cut and polish cleanly. High-quality stones can look crystal clear, but peridot is softer than many people expect, so it's rarely used in jewelry designed for daily heavy wear. Now, the part buyers don't hear: peridot is affordable. A typical peridot ring can sell around $40 to $150 depending on the setting. Simple peridot pendants often fall between $30 and $120. Even stones in the 2 to 4 carat range can still be accessible compared to emerald, especially if the color is slightly olive rather than vivid lime. So why does it look expensive? Because peridot has the visual language of high-value green gems, clean color, bright flash, and gold compatibility. It photographs like emerald, it wears like luxury, but it's produced in much larger quantities and it doesn't carry the same scarcity pressure. That's why peridot takes the number 29 spot. It's not cheap because it's low quality. It's affordable because Earth makes it in a completely different way, deep, violent, and surprisingly abundant. And in the next stone on this list, we're going to look at something even more deceptive, a gem that looks like it should be rare, but is sold everywhere for a reason almost nobody notices. Top 28. Jasper the stone. That looks like a masterpiece, but costs almost nothing. Jasper is one of the strangest gemstones on this list because it doesn't look like a gemstone at all. It looks like art. A polished piece of jasper can resemble desert landscapes, storm clouds, ancient riverbeds, even satellite images of Earth. And when it's cut into a clean cabochon and set into jewelry, it can look like something you'd expect to find in a museum gift shop for hundreds of dollars. But jasper, especially the common grades used in everyday jewelry, is usually far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've seen jasper in contexts that go far beyond fashion. Jasper shows up in ancient tools, ceremonial objects, trade goods, and carved seals. It was valued not because it was rare, but because it was reliable, hard enough to shape, stable enough to last, and visually distinctive enough to carry meaning. Jasper wasn't just decoration, it was identity. Geographically, jasper is found in enormous quantities worldwide. Major sources include the western United States, Mexico, Brazil, India, Madagascar, South Africa, and Australia. Two of the most recognizable jewelry types today are picture jasper, often associated with the American Southwest, and ocean jasper, which is strongly linked to Madagascar. The way jasper is mined is one of the reasons it stays inexpensive. Jasper typically forms in large masses rather than small crystals. That means it's extracted more like decorative stone than a gem deposit. In many regions, it's collected from surface outcrops, quarried in open pits, or recovered from weathered rock zones. It's then cut into slabs, sorted by pattern, and sent to lapidaries who select pieces based on the only thing that matters in jasper, the visual scene. Color is where jasper becomes deceptive. It can appear in warm desert browns, reds, creams, greens, and smoky grays. Picture jasper often shows layered lines that look like horizons or canyon walls. Ocean jasper can show circular orb patterns, almost like fossilized bubbles, creating a look that feels rare even when it isn't. The truth is, jasper's luxury effect comes from pattern, not brilliance. In shape, jasper is most commonly cut into smooth cabochons, thick oval stones, discs, and statement beads. It's also used in large pendant pieces because the material is available in big chunks, unlike many crystal-based gemstones. And because it polishes well, it can look premium in photos, especially under warm lighting. Now let's talk price, because this is where jasper becomes one of the most surprising stones in modern jewelry. A typical jasper bracelet can sell around $12 to $45. Jasper pendants often sit between $15 and $60. Even larger statement pieces, big enough to look like high-end artisan jewelry, can still be found around $25 to $90, depending on the metal and craftsmanship. So why does it look expensive? Because jasper sells a different illusion than most gemstones. It doesn't try to look rare through sparkle. It looks rare through narrative. Every piece looks like it has a story inside it, like it contains a landscape, a memory, a place. And that's why jasper takes the number 28 spot. It's not valuable because it's scarce. It looks valuable because it behaves like art, while being one of the most abundant story stones on Earth. And the next stone on this list gets even more deceptive because it doesn't just look expensive, it looks like something people have been faking for over 100 years. Top 27. Botswana Agate. The stone that looks like designer marble, but sells for pocket money. Botswana Agate is one of those stones that makes people pause, not because it sparkles, not because it flashes like a diamond, but because it looks engineered. Polished Botswana agate often shows perfectly layered bands, soft grays, smoky browns, pale pinks, even subtle lavender tones, stacked like high-end architecture. In jewelry, it can resemble luxury stonework, designer marble, antique porcelain, or the interior of a museum, and yet it remains surprisingly affordable. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that stones like this were never about brilliance. They were about pattern, about control. Ancient people didn't always chase sparkle. They chased stones that looked deliberate, ordered, and permanent. Agate has been traded for thousands of years because it feels like something nature shouldn't be able to make so precisely. Geographically, Botswana agate is strongly associated with one place, Botswana in southern Africa. Most of the material comes from volcanic regions where silica-rich fluids filled cavities inside ancient lava flows. Over time, layer after layer formed, like a geological recording tape, building the bands that make the stone famous. This matters because Botswana agate isn't rare in the way diamonds or emeralds are rare. It forms in large deposits, and once a deposit is discovered, it can produce huge amounts of usable material. Mining is typically done through small-scale open-pit extraction and surface collection, especially where the host rock is already weathered. Unlike gemstones that must be recovered from tiny veins, agate often occurs in nodules, rounded masses that can be cut into slabs. The process is closer to quarrying than gem hunting. Remove material, split nodules, evaluate the banding, then sort by pattern quality. Color is where Botswana agate earns its expensive reputation. The best pieces show clean, tight banding in smoky gray and warm brown tones, sometimes with subtle pink or peach layers. It has a calm, high-design palette. Nothing loud, nothing cheap-looking. Under soft lighting, it photographs like a luxury product. That's why it performs so well in thumbnails and product shots. In shape, Botswana agate is almost always cut as cabochons, flat ovals, large statement pendants, and beads. The reason is simple. Agate is about surface. You want the pattern visible. Facets would destroy the effect. A smooth polish turns it into a wearable geological painting. Now for the price. A Botswana agate bracelet typically sells around $15 to $50. Pendants often sit between $18 and $70 depending on size and metal. Even large, visually dramatic stones, pieces that look like luxury artisan jewelry, can still be found around $25 to $120. So why does it look so expensive? Because Botswana agate mimics the language of wealth in a completely different way. It doesn't imitate diamonds. It imitates design. It looks like something curated, like a stone chosen by an architect, not a miner. And that's why it takes the number 27 spot. It looks like a premium object, it wears like a premium object, but the earth produces it in vast, repeatable layers, making it one of the best luxury illusions in the gemstone world. And next, we're moving into a stone that looks even softer and more expensive. A stone that people often mistake for something that should cost 10 times more. Top 26. Blue lace agate. The soft blue stone that looks like high-end luxury, but isn't. Blue lace agate is the kind of gemstone that makes people speak quieter. It doesn't shout. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't try to impress you with fire. Instead, it looks expensive in a different way, like something you'd find inside a private collection. A calm, pale blue stone with delicate white bands, almost like frozen mist. When it's set in silver or white gold, it can look like a gemstone meant for boutique jewelry stores, the kind with locked glass cases. But in most markets, blue lace agate is far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've always found it fascinating that humans consistently assign high value to rare-looking calm. In ancient artifacts, the stones that survive are often not the brightest ones, but the ones that feel controlled, intentional, and clean. Blue lace agate fits that psychological pattern perfectly. It looks like wealth without needing brilliance. Geographically, the most famous blue lace agate comes from Namibia, particularly areas where volcanic activity left cavities that later filled with silica-rich fluids. These fluids deposited layers slowly over time, building the signature banding. Smaller deposits exist elsewhere, but Namibia is the name most associated with true classic material. Unlike gemstones that form as crystals, agate forms as layered microcrystalline quartz. That means blue lace agate usually appears in nodules or masses rather than sharp gem crystals. And that changes everything about how it's mined. Mining blue lace agate is often done through open pit extraction and surface recovery in weathered volcanic rock. The material is removed in chunks, then cut into slabs to reveal the banding. Most pieces look ordinary until they're sliced. That's why agate mining has a gambling element. You can't truly see the quality until you cut it open. Color is the reason people confuse it with more expensive stones. Blue lace agate ranges from pale sky blue to soft gray blue, with white, cream, or translucent bands. Under warm lighting, it can look even more luxurious, almost like a gemstone version of fine porcelain. But it does not have the deep saturation of sapphire, and it doesn't have the neon quality of rare blue gems. Its value comes from pattern clarity and softness, not intensity. In jewelry, blue lace agate is almost always cut as smooth cabochons, oval stones, teardrops, and beads. Faceting would ruin the entire point. The stone is meant to look like calm glass. The best pieces are cut to show the most elegant banding, thin, flowing lines rather than thick, chaotic stripes. Now let's talk price, because this is where the illusion breaks. A blue lace agate bracelet commonly sells around $18 to $55. Cabochon pendants often sit between $20 and $80 depending on size and metal. Rings can range from $25 to $120, but in most cases, the price is driven more by craftsmanship and setting than by the stone itself. So why does it look like it should cost more? Because blue lace agate mimics the aesthetics of high-end minimalism. It looks curated. It looks clean. It looks like something chosen by taste, not by budget. That's why it earns the number 26 spot. It's one of the strongest examples of a gemstone that feels expensive not because it's rare, but because it looks emotionally rare. And next on this list, we're moving to a stone that becomes even more deceptive, because it doesn't just look expensive in photos, it looks like it's glowing from inside. Top 25. Opalite, the stone that looks like a rare opal, but isn't even a gem. Opalite is one of the most deceptive stones in the modern jewelry world because it doesn't just look expensive, it looks impossible. Under the right lighting, opalite glows with a soft internal haze. Milky white, pale blue, sometimes a warm orange edge, like it's holding light inside the stone. In photos, it can resemble high-grade opal, moonstone, even rare luminous gems that people assume must be costly. But here's the archaeological truth. Opalite is not a natural gemstone, it's glass. And the reason it's on this list is because it proves how easily the human eye can be convinced by the right visual effect. As an archaeology reporter, I'm trained to look for one thing above all: provenance. Where something comes from, how it was made, and what story people tell about it. Because in history, the most valuable objects were not always the rarest ones, they were the ones that controlled perception. Opalite is exactly that kind of object. Geographically, there is no mine for opalite. It isn't pulled from mountains or riverbeds. It is manufactured, usually in industrial glass facilities. Most opalite in the jewelry market is produced in large quantities, often associated with mass production in Asia, although the style and formula have been copied worldwide for decades. The extraction process is not mining, it's production. Glass is melted at high temperature, mixed with additives that create light diffusion, then cooled and shaped. After that, it's cut, tumbled, and polished into the familiar jewelry forms. And that's where the illusion becomes powerful, because opalite is designed to imitate the optical behavior that makes certain natural stones expensive. Internal glow, soft scattering, and color shifting at the edges. In color, opalite is typically milky translucent with a pale blue cast. Under bright light, it can look icy. Under warm indoor light, it can shift toward peach or amber along the edges. That shift is one of the reasons people mistake it for opal or moonstone. But unlike true opal, opalite does not have natural play of color patterns. And unlike moonstone, it doesn't show natural adulorescence. It's a controlled glass effect, consistent, smooth, and repeatable. In shape, opalite is most commonly seen as smooth cabochons, beads, spheres, heart carvings, and thick oval stones. It's also popular in pendants because it photographs extremely well. The surface can be polished to a near-perfect gloss, giving it a luxury finish that makes it feel like a high-end gem in a thumbnail. Now the price. Because opalite is mass-produced, it is usually very cheap. A typical opalite bracelet can sell around $8 to $25. Opalite pendants often sit between $10 and $35. Rings are commonly $12 to $40, and even larger statement pieces rarely justify high prices unless the setting is heavy silver or branded. So why do people still buy it? Because opalite delivers the emotional experience of an expensive stone. It looks like light captured in mineral form. It looks like something rare, something delicate, something that shouldn't exist in bulk, and that's why it earns the number 25 spot. Not because it's a gemstone that's cheap, but because it's a stone that looks expensive. While quietly proving that sometimes the market isn't selling rarity, it's selling an illusion. And next on this list, we're moving to a stone that's even more controversial because it is natural, but it's also one of the most frequently dyed and misrepresented stones on Earth. Top 24. Sodalite, the deep blue stone that looks like lapis, but costs almost nothing. Sodalite is one of the most underrated, luxury-looking stones in the entire gemstone world because it borrows the visual authority of one of history's most expensive colors, deep royal blue. At first glance, a polished sodalite cabochon can look like lapis lazuli, the same rich blue body, the same pale veining, the same sense of old-world prestige. In jewelry, especially when set in silver, it can look like a museum-grade stone, something that belongs to scholars, collectors, and ancient royalty. But sodalite is usually far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've seen blue stones repeatedly treated like power objects. Across ancient cultures, blue was never just a color. It was a message. It implied distance, rarity, and control, because true blue pigments and blue stones were historically difficult to obtain. That is why lapis lazuli was once traded like gold. And that is why sodalite, even today, triggers the same psychological reaction. Geographically, sodalite is found in several major regions. Important sources include Canada, especially Ontario, Brazil, Namibia, Russia, and parts of the United States. It forms inside igneous rocks, often in environments associated with alkaline intrusions, places where unusual mineral chemistry produces stones with intense color. Mining sodalite is typically done through open-pit quarry extraction and large block removal, because the stone often occurs in sizable masses rather than small gem crystals. It is not mined like sapphire or emerald. It is mined more like decorative stone, cut into blocks, transported, then sliced into slabs for lapidary work. Color is the reason sodalite looks expensive. It ranges from medium to deep royal blue, often with white calcite streaks or cloudy patches. Some pieces show almost marble-like veining, which makes them look intentional, like design rather than geology. Unlike lapis, sodalite usually lacks gold pyrite flecks. That's one of the easiest ways to tell them apart, but in photos, many viewers won't notice. They just see a stone that feels historical and expensive. In shape, sodalite is commonly cut into cabochons, beads, thick ovals, and large pendants. It is rarely faceted because its value is not in brilliance. It is in surface color and pattern. The best sodalite jewelry pieces are cut wide and smooth, maximizing that royal blue impact. Now let's talk price. Sodalite jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $12 to $45. Pendants often sit between $15 and $70 depending on size and metal. Rings are typically $20 to $90. Even larger statement stones, pieces that look like boutique luxury, often remain accessible because the raw material is abundant. So why does sodalite look expensive? Because it imitates the psychological status of lapis lazuli. It carries the same ancient scholar energy, the same deep blue seriousness, the same feeling of authority. That's why sodalite earns the number 24 spot. It's not rare, it just looks like something that used to be priceless. And next on this list, we're moving to a stone that takes the luxury illusion even further, because it doesn't look like a gemstone. It looks like high-end architecture carved into mineral form. Top 23. Howlite, natural white howlite. The stone that looks like rare marble, but is sold everywhere. Natural howlite is one of the quietest illusions in the gemstone world. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't flash, It doesn't look like a classic precious gem. Instead, it looks like something expensive in a modern designer way. Smooth white stone with elegant gray veining, like miniature marble. The kind of material you'd expect in high-end interior design, not in a $15 bracelet. And yet, howlite is often one of the cheapest stones in the jewelry market. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans have always been attracted to stones that look like control. White stone, clean lines, calm patterning. These are signals of refinement in almost every culture. In ancient sites, pale stones were often associated with purity, authority, and ritual. Not because they were rare, but because they were visually disciplined. Howlite taps into that same psychology. Geographically, howlite is most strongly associated with North America. It is found in the western United States, especially in areas with borat mineral deposits. It also occurs in Canada, and smaller deposits exist in other regions. Howlite forms in nodules and irregular masses, often in dry environments where boron-rich fluids interacted with sedimentary material. Unlike gemstones that form as clean crystals, howlite rarely appears as sharp, transparent structures. It is usually dense, opaque, and naturally patterned, white with gray or black webbing. Mining howlite is relatively direct. It is typically extracted through small quarry-style operations or open-pit mining. The stone is removed in chunks, then sorted by how clean the white base is and how aesthetically pleasing the veining appears. Because it is not rare and not difficult to extract, large quantities can enter the market quickly. That's one of the reasons it stays inexpensive. Color is what makes natural howlite look more expensive than it is. In its natural state, it is usually chalky white to bright white, with fine gray or black veins that resemble marble. When polished well, it becomes smooth and slightly glossy, giving it a premium finish in photos. Under soft lighting, it can look like a high-end minimalist gemstone, something you'd see in boutique jewelry stores. In shape, howlite is almost always cut into beads, oval cabochons, flat discs, and smooth pendants. It is also frequently carved into small decorative shapes because it is easy to work with compared to harder gems. You'll often see it in modern, clean aesthetic jewelry, where the stone is meant to feel calm, neutral, and expensive-looking. Now let's talk price. A natural howlite bracelet often sells around $10 to $30. Howlite pendants commonly sit between $12 and $45. Rings are usually $15 to $60 depending on the setting. Even large howlite statement pieces rarely become expensive unless they are part of designer craftsmanship or heavy silver work. So why does it look like it should cost more? Because it resembles materials associated with wealth. Marble, porcelain, sculpture stone. It has the museum object feel. It looks curated, it looks intentional, and because it's neutral, it pairs with everything, making it feel like a premium lifestyle stone. That's why it earns the number 23 spot. Howlite isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it imitates the aesthetics of luxury materials, while being one of the most accessible stones on Earth. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that takes this illusion even further, because it doesn't just look expensive. It looks like it's glowing from inside, even when the price says it shouldn't. Top 22. Amazonite, the stone that looks like premium turquoise, but isn't even close. Amazonite is one of the most visually convincing, luxury-looking stones in the modern jewelry world. At a glance, it can look like high-grade turquoise. Sometimes even more elegant, because instead of rough matrix patterns, Amazonite often shows smooth blue-green color with soft white streaking like frozen water. When it's polished into a clean cabochon and set in silver, it can look like boutique jewelry that should cost hundreds. But in most markets, Amazonite is far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've always found it fascinating how strongly humans respond to blue-green stones. Across cultures, that color has been linked to water, fertility, protection, and power. Ancient people didn't just wear blue-green stones for beauty, they treated them like symbols of control over nature itself. Amazonite inherits that same visual authority, even when the price doesn't match. Geographically, Amazonite is found in several important regions. Major sources include Brazil, Madagascar, Russia, the United States, especially Colorado and Virginia, and parts of India. It forms inside granitic rocks, often associated with pegmatites, coarse-grained mineral zones where crystals can grow large. That's one reason Amazonite can appear in big, jewelry-friendly pieces. The material often occurs in sizable blocks rather than tiny fragments. Mining Amazonite is typically done through small quarry operations and open-pit extraction in pegmatite zones. In many cases, it's removed alongside other minerals like quartz and feldspar. The stone is then cut into slabs and sorted by color quality. The best Amazonite is selected for clean, saturated blue-green tones, while lower-grade material is paler or more heavily streaked. Color is where Amazonite earns its expensive reputation. It ranges from pale mint green to strong turquoise green, sometimes with a slightly bluish cast. Many pieces show white streaks or cloudy zones, and the best stones balance this perfectly. Enough pattern to look natural, but not so much that it looks messy. In photos, Amazonite can look like an expensive, premium turquoise because it has that same calm blue-green presence. But unlike turquoise, Amazonite is actually a variety of feldspar. It doesn't carry the same cultural legacy in jewelry markets, and it's produced in larger quantities, keeping prices lower. In shape, Amazonite is most commonly cut into smooth cabochons, beads, flat ovals, and statement pendants. It's rarely faceted because its beauty comes from surface color and internal texture rather than sparkle. Large Amazonite pendants are especially common because the material is available in big slabs and polishes to a smooth, luxurious finish. Now, let's talk price. Amazonite jewelry is usually accessible. Bracelets often sell around $15 to $55. Pendants commonly sit between $18 and $80 depending on size and setting. Rings are typically $25 to $120, with most of the price coming from metal and craftsmanship rather than the stone itself. So why does Amazonite look expensive? Because it imitates the visual language of one of the most historically valuable colors in the gemstone world, controlled blue-green. It looks calm, rare, and premium in a way that photographs beautifully. That's why Amazonite earns the number 22 spot. It's not a cheap stone pretending to be expensive. It's an affordable stone that naturally carries the face of luxury. And next on this list, we're moving to a gem that becomes even more confusing because it looks like a high-end green stone, but the market treats it like it's almost disposable. Top 21. Chrysoprase, the green gem that looks like jade but sells for a fraction. Chrysoprase is one of those stones that can make a jewelry display look instantly expensive, not because it sparkles, but because it carries a color that humans have historically treated like wealth, a smooth, rich green, clean, calm, and confident. In certain cuts, Chrysoprase can resemble high-grade jade. In others, it can look like a boutique emerald substitute, and when it's set in gold, it can look like a stone that belongs in an heirloom box. But here's the twist. In most markets, Chrysoprase is still surprisingly affordable. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that green stones are never judged purely by geology. They're judged by memory. Jade, in particular, has thousands of years of cultural authority behind it. So whenever a stone shows that same quiet green power, people instinctively assume it must be rare and expensive. Chrysoprase borrows that authority through appearance alone. Geographically, Chrysoprase is found in several key regions, but the most important sources include Australia, especially Western Australia, along with deposits in Brazil, Madagascar, South Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, historically including Poland. Chrysoprase forms when silica-rich material becomes colored by trace amounts of nickel, often in weathered zones above ultramafic rock. This matters because chrysoprase is not a crystal gem in the classic sense. It's a form of chalcedony, microcrystalline quartz, meaning it often occurs in masses rather than sharp crystal shapes. Mining chrysoprase is typically done through open-pit extraction or small quarry-style digging, especially in weathered ground where the material can be recovered in chunks. It is then cut into slabs and sorted. The best chrysoprase is selected for strong, even color. Lower grades are paler, more cloudy, or more heavily included. Color is the entire reason Chrysoprase looks expensive. It ranges from apple green to rich, slightly bluish green. The best material looks almost unreal, like green porcelain or polished jade. It's not transparent like emerald, it's translucent, with a soft internal glow that reads as high-end on camera. And because chrysoprase often has a smooth, waxy polish, it carries the same surface behavior that makes jade look luxurious. That's why, in photos, many people cannot tell the difference. In shape, chrysoprase is most commonly cut into cabochons, thick ovals, smooth beads, and flat pendants. Faceting is rare because the stone's beauty is not about sparkle, it's about body color. Jewelry makers choose shapes that maximize surface area because that's where chrysoprase sells its illusion. Now let's talk price. Chrysoprase is more expensive than some stones on this list, but still far cheaper than what it resembles. A chrysoprase bracelet typically sells around $25 to $90. Pendants often sit between $30 and $140 depending on size and metal. Rings commonly range from $40 to $180 in most commercial jewelry settings. High-grade Australian chrysoprase can go much higher, especially in collector markets, but the material most people encounter in everyday jewelry remains accessible. So why does it look like it should cost more? Because chrysoprase wears the face of jade and the aura of ancient green authority. It looks like a stone with history, even when it's being sold in modern boutique displays. That's why chrysoprase earns the number 21 spot. It doesn't look expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it shares a visual language with some of the most culturally powerful gems ever worn. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more luxurious, because it carries one of the most iconic patterns in the world. A pattern so famous that people often forget how common the stone actually is. Top 20. Malachite. The stone that looks like luxury architecture, but isn't rare. Malachite is one of the most instantly expensive-looking stones on Earth, not because it sparkles, because it looks designed. A polished malachite cabochon can resemble high-end Italian marble, luxury interior panels, or the kind of decorative stone you'd expect in a palace. Its green bands curve like fingerprints, bold, hypnotic, and unmistakable. And when it's set into jewelry, malachite doesn't look like a gem you bought, it looks like an artifact. As an archaeology reporter, I've seen malachite in contexts that go far beyond fashion. Malachite appears in ancient pigments, carved amulets, and burial objects. It was ground into green powder for art, used as a symbol of fertility and protection, and traded long before modern gem markets existed. For ancient people, malachite wasn't pretty, it was power, because green stones were tied to life, growth, and divine authority. Geographically, the most famous malachite sources are strongly linked to copper regions. Major deposits include the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially the Katanga region, Zambia, Russia, historically the Ural Mountains, Namibia, and parts of Australia and the United States. Malachite forms as a secondary mineral in copper ore zones, meaning wherever copper is present and groundwater chemistry is right, malachite can form. This is the first reason malachite is not as rare as people think. It's not a gemstone that forms only in one place. It forms wherever copper deposits exist. Mining malachite is usually tied to copper extraction. In many cases, malachite is recovered as a byproduct from copper mines. It can also be mined directly through open-pit operations and quarry-style removal, where blocks of banded material are extracted and later cut into slabs. The best jewelry-grade malachite is selected for tight, clean banding and strong color, while lower grades show duller green, fractures, or muddy patterns. Color is malachite's entire identity. It ranges from bright green to deep forest green, with signature banding that can appear as concentric circles, waves, or striped layers. Under polished light, malachite can look almost unreal, like a gemstone version of luxury wallpaper. That is why it photographs so well, especially for thumbnails and product shots. It doesn't need sparkle, it needs pattern. In shape, malachite is most commonly cut into cabochons, flat ovals, thick beads, and large statement pendants. It is rarely faceted because malachite is not about brilliance, it's about surface design. And because it often comes in slabs, it can be cut into large pieces that look expensive even in simple settings. Now the price, because this is where the illusion breaks. Malachite jewelry can be surprisingly affordable. A typical malachite bracelet often sells around $20 to $70. Malachite pendants commonly sit between $25 and $120 depending on size and metal. Rings are often $30 to $180, with most of the price driven by craftsmanship and setting, not by rarity. High-end pieces exist, especially with exceptional banding and solid gold settings, but most malachite in the market is accessible. So why does malachite look like it should cost more? Because it imitates luxury materials, not luxury gems. It looks like architectural wealth, like something carved from a palace wall. It carries the visual language of design, power, and permanence. That's why malachite earns the number 20 spot. It doesn't look expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because nature gave it a pattern humans associate with wealth. And next on this list, we're moving to a stone that looks even more high-end in a completely different way, because it doesn't look like marble. It looks like pure green glass, polished into silence. Top 19. Unakite the stone. That looks like designer granite, but is shockingly cheap. Unakite is one of the strangest, expensive-looking stones you can wear because it doesn't look like a gemstone. It looks like architecture. Polished unakite has the texture of high-end granite countertops, mottled green and salmon pink, with black specks and mineral depth that makes it feel heavy, permanent, and expensive. In jewelry, especially in large beads or thick pendants, it can look like something carved from a museum wall. But unakite is usually one of the most affordable stones in the entire lapidary market. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that people don't always associate value with sparkle. In many ancient cultures, the stones used for tools, seals, and ritual objects were valued because they looked durable, like they could outlast generations. Unakite carries that same visual message. It looks like it belongs to the Earth's backbone, not a jewelry counter. Geographically, unakite is most strongly associated with the United States, especially the Appalachian region. The stone was first identified in the Unakite Mountains, which is where it gets its name. It also appears in other parts of the world, including South Africa, Brazil, and China, but the Appalachian material remains one of the best-known sources. Unakite forms as a metamorphosed granite, meaning it's created when granite undergoes chemical alteration and pressure over time. It's essentially a rock composed mainly of green peridot, pink feldspar, and quartz. That composition is important because it explains why unakite can appear in large, solid masses, perfect for cutting big jewelry pieces. Mining unakite is usually not gem mining. It is more like quarry extraction and surface collection. In many areas, unakite can be found in large boulders and outcrops, or collected from riverbeds where erosion has exposed it. It is cut into slabs, sorted for the best color balance, and then shaped by lapidaries. The process is scalable, which is one reason unakite stays inexpensive. Color is where unakite becomes deceptive. It typically shows a mix of mossy green and warm pink, sometimes with creamy quartz zones. The contrast is what makes it feel expensive, because it resembles natural stone used in luxury building design. Under polish, the colors become richer and smoother, giving it a premium stone look, especially in close-up shots. In shape, unakite is commonly cut into large beads, thick cabochons, oval pendants, and chunky bracelets. It is rarely faceted because it isn't transparent and doesn't sparkle. Its value is in its surface pattern, like a miniature piece of geological architecture. Now the price. Unakite jewelry is usually very affordable. Bracelets commonly sell around $12 to $40. Pendants often sit between $15 and $55. Rings are typically $18 to $70, depending mostly on the metal and craftsmanship. Even large statement pieces can remain inexpensive because the raw material is abundant and easy to cut in bulk. So why does Unakite look expensive? Because it doesn't look like a gemstone. It looks like a luxury building material, something permanent, heavy, and curated. It signals stability. It signals taste. It signals this belongs in a high-end space. That's why Unakite earns the number 19 spot. It's not rare. It's not fragile. It's just one of the best examples of how a stone can look expensive purely through texture and design, while staying quietly cheap in the real market. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more premium, because it doesn't look like granite. It looks like a carved piece of ancient war paint turned into jewelry. Top 18. Rhodonite. The stone that looks like luxury pink marble, but costs almost nothing. Rhodonite is one of the most visually expensive-looking stones you can wear because it doesn't behave like a gemstone. It behaves like sculpture. A polished rhodonite cabochon can look like pink marble from an old palace. Soft rose tones crossed by dramatic black veins, like ink spilled across stone. In jewelry, it can look like a rare boutique material, the kind of stone you'd expect to see in an artisan gallery with a price tag that makes you hesitate. But rhodonite is often far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans have always attached status to stones that look like carved authority, not shiny stones, not sparkly stones, stones that look like they belong in architecture, ritual objects, and burial goods. Rhodonite fits that ancient instinct perfectly. It doesn't look like jewelry. It looks like an artifact. Geographically, rhodonite is found in several key regions. Notable sources include Russia, historically famous for large decorative-grade material, Australia, Brazil, Madagascar, South Africa, Sweden, and parts of the United States. It forms in metamorphic environments, often associated with manganese-rich deposits. That manganese connection matters because it explains both the color and the way rhodonite appears in large, solid pieces, ideal for carving and jewelry. Mining rhodonite is typically done through open-pit extraction and quarry-style removal, especially where it occurs as massive material rather than small crystals. It's often recovered alongside other manganese minerals. The stone is cut into blocks, sliced into slabs, then sorted for the most attractive pink base color and the most dramatic black veining. Color is the reason rhodonite looks expensive. The best rhodonite shows a rich rose pink to deep pink body color with bold black manganese oxide veins. Under polish, it can look like luxury interior stone, something you'd see in a high-end hotel lobby. Some pieces lean more red, others lean more dusty pink, but the signature is always the same: pink strength with black structure. In shape, rhodonite is most commonly cut into smooth cabochons, thick oval pendants, statement beads, and large bracelet stones. It is rarely faceted because it's usually opaque, and its beauty comes from surface design. The best rhodonite jewelry pieces are cut wide, letting the stone display its marble illusion. Now the price. Rhodonite jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $15 to $55. Pendants often sit between $18 and $80 depending on size and metal. Rings are typically $25 to $120, and most of that price comes from craftsmanship rather than the stone itself. Even large rhodonite statement pieces can remain accessible because the raw material is available in large slabs. So why does rhodonite look like it should cost more? Because it imitates luxury stonework. It looks like something that belongs in architecture, not in a bead shop. It has visual weight. It has seriousness. It has that museum object presence. That's why rhodonite earns the number 18 spot. It's not rare. It's not fragile. It simply carries the aesthetic language of expensive materials: pink marble, black ink veins, and sculptural permanence. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more high-end in photos because it doesn't look like marble. It looks like sunlight trapped inside a gemstone. Top 17. Sunstone. The gem that looks like it has gold inside, but isn't rare. Sunstone is one of the most dangerous stones on this list. Dangerous not because it's fake, not because it's toxic, but because it photographs like luxury. In the right lighting, sunstone can look like a gemstone with real gold suspended inside it, warm orange to peach body color, and a metallic glitter effect that flashes like tiny copper mirrors. Set in gold jewelry, it can look like a high-end collector gem, something you'd expect to be rare, expensive, and difficult to obtain. But most sunstone sold in everyday jewelry is far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans are wired to treat gold-like light as value. Across cultures, anything that resembles metal, especially warm, reflective metal, triggers an ancient association with wealth, power, and status. Sunstone exploits that instinct perfectly, even when the stone itself is not rare. Geographically, sunstone is found in several important regions. The most famous sources include India, Tanzania, Canada, Norway, and the United States, especially Oregon, which produces some of the most recognized material. Sunstone is a feldspar mineral, and it forms in igneous environments, often connected to volcanic activity and cooling magma bodies. Mining sunstone depends heavily on location. In some regions, it's recovered through small-scale open-pit operations and surface digging, where feldspar-bearing rock is excavated and sorted. In Oregon, sunstone is mined in desert conditions where the stones are recovered from basalt flows and gravel deposits. The process is less like gem hunting and more like geological extraction. Dig, sort, wash, and separate the crystals. Color is where sunstone becomes deceptive. It ranges from pale champagne to peach, orange, and warm, reddish tones. Some stones show a coppery shimmer called aventurescence, caused by tiny plate-like inclusions, often copper or hematite. That shimmer is what makes sunstone look expensive, because it behaves like a gemstone version of metallic foil. Under soft light, the stone looks calm and elegant. Under direct light, it explodes with glitter. That contrast is exactly what makes people assume it must be high value. In shape, sunstone is commonly cut into faceted ovals, rounds, cushions, and occasionally pear shapes. Unlike many opaque stones on this list, sunstone is often transparent to translucent, so faceting works well. But the best cuts are designed to maximize the metallic flash rather than brilliance. In commercial jewelry, you'll also see sunstone cabochons, especially when the stone is more included. Now let's talk price. Most sunstone jewelry is accessible. Rings commonly sell around $40 to $180 depending on size and setting. Pendants often sit between $35 and $140. Small sunstone earrings can be $25 to $90. Loose stones in common grades are usually affordable, and the price increases mainly with strong color, clean clarity, and intense shimmer. High-end Oregon sunstone, especially rare colors like strong red or bicolor green to red, can become expensive. But the sunstone most people encounter in everyday jewelry remains surprisingly affordable. So why does it look like it should cost more? Because it mimics one of the strongest symbols of wealth in human history: metallic gold light. It looks like treasure. It looks like something that should be locked away. That's why sunstone earns the number 17 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it carries the visual signature of gold inside a gemstone. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that can look even more premium because it doesn't glitter like gold. It flashes like a hidden aurora trapped under black stone. Top 16. Labradorite. The stone that looks like a hidden aurora but is surprisingly common. Labradorite is one of the most visually expensive-looking stones you can possibly wear because it doesn't just shine, it performs. A polished piece of labradorite can flash electric blue, green, gold, and sometimes even violet, like an aurora trapped under stone. In jewelry photos, it can look like a rare collector gem, the kind of thing you'd expect to cost hundreds or thousands. But here's the truth. Most labradorite on the market is far more affordable than its appearance suggests. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans instinctively treat moving light as value. In ancient times, the rarest materials were the ones that seemed alive, stones that changed color, reflected like metal, or held light in unnatural ways. Labradorite hits that ancient trigger perfectly. It looks supernatural, even though it's completely geological. Geographically, Labradorite is found in several major regions. The most famous sources include Canada, especially Labrador, which gave the stone its name, along with Madagascar, Finland, Russia, and parts of the United States. Madagascar in particular supplies a huge amount of the labradorite used in modern jewelry, including the large slabs and dramatic flash pieces. Labradorite forms in igneous environments as a feldspar mineral, often inside large bodies of cooled magma. That means it doesn't form as tiny, rare crystals. It forms as massive material, large enough to cut into big cabochons and statement pendants. Mining labradorite is usually done through open-pit extraction and quarry-style removal. In many places, it's recovered as blocks from exposed rock, then cut into slabs. The real selection happens after mining. Cutters look for the angle that produces the strongest labradorescence, the optical flash effect. Two stones from the same block can look completely different depending on how they're cut. Color is where labradorite becomes dangerous. Most pieces look gray, charcoal, or smoky on the surface. But when light hits the internal layers, the stone ignites. Blue, green, gold, sometimes fiery orange. That contrast is exactly what makes it feel expensive. It looks like a hidden luxury mechanism inside a dark shell. In shape, labradorite is most commonly cut into cabochons, ovals, teardrops, and large pendants. Faceting is rare because the flash works best on smooth surfaces. You'll also see labradorite beads, but the most expensive-looking pieces are always large cabochons, because bigger surface area means bigger light. Now let's talk price. Labradorite jewelry is often affordable. Bracelets commonly sell around $18 to $70. Pendants often sit between $25 and $120 depending on size and silver weight. Rings are typically $30 to $180. The stone itself usually isn't the expensive part, the setting and craftsmanship are. The price increases mainly with strong, full-face flash, rare colors, and clean polish. But the majority of labradorite sold in everyday jewelry remains accessible. So why does it look like it should cost more? Because labradorite doesn't look like a stone. It looks like a special effect. It looks like a gemstone that shouldn't exist in nature, which makes the brain assume it must be rare. That's why labradorite earns the number 16 spot. It's not expensive because it's scarce. It looks expensive because it behaves like light trapped in mineral layers. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks softer, but can be even more misleading, because it doesn't flash like an aurora. It glows like a moon. Top 15. Moonstone. The gem that looks like frozen moonlight, but usually isn't expensive. Moonstone is one of the most elegant-looking gemstones in the world because it doesn't shine like a diamond. It glows. A good moonstone doesn't just reflect light. It carries it. Soft, milky, floating across the surface like a pale blue flame under ice. In jewelry, especially in silver or white gold, moonstone can look like a high-end boutique gem, the kind of stone associated with old European design and expensive vintage collections. But most moonstone in the modern market is far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, I've seen moonstone's visual language repeated in ancient objects and ritual artifacts. Humans have always assigned high value to stones that resemble the sky: moonlight, clouds, pale water, spiritual light. Even when the stone itself wasn't rare, the effect made it feel rare. Moonstone is one of the best examples of that psychological trap. Geographically, moonstone is found in several important regions. Major sources include Sri Lanka, India, Madagascar, Myanmar, and parts of the United States. Sri Lanka is historically associated with some of the finest blue sheen moonstone, while India produces a huge amount of commercial-grade material used in modern jewelry. Moonstone is a feldspar mineral, meaning it forms in igneous environments often connected to pegmatites, mineral zones where crystals can grow large. This is one reason Moonstone is available in big pieces suitable for pendants and statement rings. Mining Moonstone is typically done through small-scale extraction, open pits, and quarry-style removal. In many regions, miners recover feldspar-bearing material, then sort by translucency and sheen. The most valuable moonstone isn't chosen by size alone, it's chosen by how the stone moves light across its surface. Color is where moonstone becomes deceptive. Most commercial moonstone is milky white, cream, or slightly gray. Some stones show a pale blue sheen, others show a warm, silvery glow. The best pieces display strong blue adulorescence, an optical effect caused by light scattering inside thin internal layers. But here's the key detail. Many moonstones in the market have only a weak glow. In photos, they can still look expensive, because even a small sheen reads as mystical luxury. In shape, moonstone is most commonly cut as cabochons, oval domes, teardrops, and smooth rounds. Faceting is rare because it destroys the glow. The best moonstone cuts are designed to maximize surface movement, letting the light slide across the stone like liquid. Now let's talk price. Moonstone jewelry is usually accessible. Bracelets commonly sell around $15 to $60. Pendants often sit between $20 and $120 depending on size and metal. Rings are typically $25 to $180, with most of the price driven by the setting. High-grade Sri Lankan moonstone with strong blue sheen can be much more expensive, but the moonstone most people encounter in everyday jewelry remains affordable. So why does moonstone look like it should cost more? Because it carries one of the rarest visual effects humans can recognize instantly: internal light. It doesn't glitter, it doesn't sparkle, it glows like something alive inside stone. That's why moonstone earns the number 15 spot. It's not expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it imitates the sky. Quiet, luminous, and emotionally powerful. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that's even more visually intense because it doesn't glow like moonlight. It looks like pure crystal fire trapped in blue. Top 14. Fluorite. The gem that looks like colored glass from a museum, but costs almost nothing. Fluorite is one of the most visually expensive-looking stones you can possibly hold because it doesn't look like a normal gemstone. It looks like a curated artifact. A polished fluorite piece can show clean bands of purple, green, blue, and even honey yellow, sometimes in the same stone, like layered color trapped inside crystal. In jewelry photos, fluorite can look like a rare collector mineral, the kind of stone you'd expect to see behind glass in a museum shop with a high price tag. But here's the truth: fluorite is often surprisingly cheap. As an archaeology reporter, fluorite is the kind of mineral I've seen appear in places people don't expect, near ancient mining zones, in historical industrial sites, and in the records of early scientific exploration. Fluorite wasn't always worn as jewelry. For a long time it was valued because it was useful, because it helped people melt metal, refine ore, and build the industrial world. That is why it exists in huge quantities and why it remains accessible today. Geographically, fluorite is found in many countries, but major sources include China, Mexico, South Africa, Mongolia, Spain, and the United States. It forms in hydrothermal environments where mineral-rich fluids move through cracks in rock and deposit crystals as they cool. Because these conditions occur widely, fluorite deposits are common across the planet. Mining fluorite is typically done through open-pit extraction and underground mining, depending on the deposit. In many regions, fluorite is mined not as a gemstone but as an industrial mineral used in metallurgy and chemical production. Jewelry-grade material is often selected from the cleaner, more colorful pieces after the main extraction process. That is one of the most important reasons fluorite stays affordable. The mining infrastructure exists for industry, not luxury. Color is where fluorite becomes dangerously convincing. It can appear in clear crystal, pale green, deep emerald green, violet purple, blue, and sometimes yellow. Many stones show banding, layers of different colors stacked like geological watercolor. Under good lighting, Fluorite can look like expensive designer glass or even a fantasy gemstone. But unlike many high-value gems, fluorite's color is often soft and dreamy rather than intense. In shape, fluorite is commonly cut into smooth cabochons, beads, and thick pendants. It is also carved into spheres and decorative forms because it cuts easily. Faceting is less common because fluorite is relatively soft compared to quartz and sapphire. It scratches more easily, which is why it's not ideal for daily wear rings unless protected. Now let's talk price. Fluorite jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $10 to $35. Pendants often sit between $12 and $60. Rings are typically $15 to $80, with most of the price driven by the metal rather than the stone. Large fluorite statement pieces can still be affordable because the raw material is widely available. So why does fluorite look expensive? Because it looks like controlled color. It looks like something engineered, clean, layered, and museum perfect. It gives the brain the impression of rarity, even when the earth produces it in massive deposits. That's why fluorite earns the number 14 spot. It's not expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it behaves like a display object, like a mineral that belongs in a collection. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more high-end because it doesn't look like museum glass. It looks like a deep ocean gemstone that people confuse with far more expensive blues. Top 13. Blue Apatite, the ocean blue gem that looks like Peridot, but isn't. Blue Apatite is one of the most dangerous stones on this list because it carries the visual language of a gemstone that can cost more than a house. That gemstone is Peridot tourmaline, and in photos, especially under bright lighting, blue apatite can look shockingly similar. Electric blue, tropical, almost neon. Set into jewelry, it can look like a rare high-end collector stone, the kind of gem you'd expect to be locked behind glass. But blue apatite is usually nowhere near that price. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans don't just value stones by rarity, they value stones by recognition. The moment a color becomes famous, like Peridot blue, anything that resembles it instantly inherits that status. Blue apatite is one of the clearest examples of this effect. It borrows a legendary color, without having the legendary scarcity. Geographically, blue apatite is found in several regions, but the most common commercial sources include Madagascar, Brazil, Mexico, and parts of Myanmar. It forms in different geological environments, often in igneous and metamorphic settings, sometimes in association with phosphate-rich rocks. Unlike gemstones that are tied to one iconic location, apatite occurs in many places, one of the reasons it remains available. Mining blue apatite is usually done through small-scale operations, open pits, and localized digging where gem pockets occur. The stones are recovered as crystals or rough pieces, then sorted by clarity and color. In Madagascar, a major supplier, apatite is often recovered in deposits that produce large quantities of material suitable for jewelry cutting. Color is where blue apatite becomes deceptive. It ranges from sea blue to teal blue, sometimes with a glowing, tropical water look. Under strong light, it can appear almost neon, especially in clean stones. But unlike Peridot tourmaline, apatite's color can look slightly softer or more glassy. It has beauty, but it doesn't have the same intensity stability across lighting conditions. In shape, blue apatite is often cut into faceted ovals, cushions, rounds, and pear shapes. It can look stunning when faceted because it has good brilliance. But here's the critical detail most buyers don't know. Apatite is relatively soft compared to sapphire and tourmaline. That means it scratches more easily, and it's not ideal for daily wear rings unless protected. Now let's talk price, because this is where the illusion breaks completely. Blue apatite jewelry is usually affordable. Faceted apatite rings commonly sell around $40 to $160, depending on size and setting. Pendants often sit between $35 and $140. Loose stones can be inexpensive compared to other vivid blue gems, and even larger pieces may remain accessible unless the color is unusually intense and the cut is high quality. So why does it look expensive? Because it imitates one of the most famous modern gem colors ever marketed. It looks like Paraiba to the untrained eye. It photographs like Paraiba. It triggers the same rare blue reaction. But the market doesn't price it like Paraiba because the supply is much larger and the stone is much softer. That's why Blue Apatite earns the number 13 spot. It's not cheap because it's ugly. It's affordable because it's fragile, and because the earth produces it far more easily than the legendary gems it resembles. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more premium in a completely different way because it doesn't look like tropical water. It looks like a gemstone carved from deep purple velvet. Top 12. Sodalite. The royal blue stone that looks like lapis, but costs almost nothing. Sodalite is one of the most deceptive stones in the entire jewelry world because it borrows one of the most expensive-looking colors in human history, royal blue. At first glance, a polished sodalite cabochon can look like lapis lazuli. The same deep, serious blue, the same pale veining, the same feeling of ancient prestige. In jewelry, especially when set in silver, sodalite can look like a museum stone, something a scholar, a priest, or a noble would have worn centuries ago. But sodalite is usually far more affordable than people expect. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that blue stones were never treated as simple decoration. Across ancient cultures, blue was associated with distance, divinity, and power, because true blue materials were historically hard to obtain. That's why lapis lazuli was once traded like gold, and that's why sodalite, even today, triggers the same reaction in the human mind. This must be rare. Geographically, sodalite is found in several major regions. Important sources include Canada, especially Ontario, Brazil, Namibia, Russia, and parts of the United States. It forms inside igneous rocks, often linked to alkaline intrusions, unusual geological environments that create intensely colored minerals. Mining sodalite is typically done through open-pit quarry extraction and large block removal. It is not mined like sapphire or emerald. It is mined more like decorative stone. Blocks are cut, transported, then sliced into slabs for lapidary work. That's one reason sodalite remains accessible, because it can be produced in volume. Color is the entire reason sodalite looks expensive. It ranges from medium to deep royal blue, often with white calcite streaks that can resemble natural marble veining. Unlike lapis, sodalite usually lacks gold pyrite flecks. That's one of the easiest ways to tell them apart. But in photos, most viewers won't notice. They just see a stone that looks historical and premium. In shape, sodalite is most commonly cut into cabochons, beads, thick ovals, and large pendants. It is rarely faceted because it isn't about sparkle. It is about surface color and pattern. The best pieces are cut wide and smooth to maximize the royal blue impact. Now let's talk price. Sodalite jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $12 to $45. Pendants often sit between $15 and $70 depending on size and metal. Rings are typically $20 to $90. Even large statement stones often remain affordable because the raw material is abundant. So why does sodalite look expensive? Because it imitates the psychological status of lapis lazuli. It carries the same ancient authority energy, the same deep blue seriousness, the same museum-like presence. That's why sodalite earns the number 12 spot. It's not rare. It just looks like something that used to be priceless. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more luxurious, because it doesn't look like a royal artifact. It looks like a gemstone that was literally carved from fire. Top 11. Lapis lazuli, the stone that looks like ancient royalty but often isn't expensive. Lapis lazuli is one of the most historically powerful stones ever worn by humans, not because it sparkles, because it carries the color of authority. That deep, ultramarine blue, so rich it looks like it was painted onto the stone, has been linked to kings, priests, and empires for thousands of years. In jewelry, lapis can look like a museum artifact, the kind of stone that should be priceless, locked away, and protected by glass. But here's the twist. Most lapis lazuli sold in modern jewelry is not rare, and often not expensive. As an archaeology reporter, lapis is a stone I've seen in the most serious places: ancient burial goods, royal ornaments, carved seals, and pigment residues inside tombs. It was once so valuable that it traveled across continents through early trade routes. The famous ultramarine pigment used in Renaissance art was made from lapis, and it was once more expensive than gold. So why is lapis on a list of stones that look expensive but aren't? Because the lapis most people buy today is usually commercial-grade material, and the market is flooded with it. Geographically, the most famous lapis lazuli comes from Afghanistan, particularly the Badakhshan region, one of the oldest known lapis mining areas on Earth. That source has been active for thousands of years. Lapis is also found in Chile, Russia, and smaller deposits in other regions, but Afghanistan remains the name most tied to classic deep blue lapis. Mining lapis lazuli is usually done through hard rock extraction, removing blocks from mountainous deposits. In Afghanistan, this has historically involved difficult terrain, narrow mining zones, and intense manual labor. But lapis is not mined as tiny crystals. It is mined as large masses. That means large quantities can be cut into slabs, beads, and cabochons, feeding the jewelry market at scale. Color is where lapis creates its expensive illusion. The best lapis shows deep blue with scattered gold pyrite flecks, like stars in a night sky. That is the royal look, but most commercial lapis is lighter, more grayish, or heavily veined with white calcite. And here's the key. Even lower-grade lapis still looks expensive in photos because the brain reads deep blue stone as luxury by default. In shape, lapis is most commonly cut into beads, cabochons, flat ovals, thick pendants, and inlay pieces. It is rarely facetted because it's usually opaque, and its value is in surface color. Many lapis pieces are also cut into large statement shapes because the material comes in big blocks. Now let's talk price. Commercial lapis jewelry is often affordable. Bracelets commonly sell around $15 to $60. Pendants often sit between $20 and $120 depending on size and metal. Rings are typically $25 to $180, with most of the price driven by craftsmanship rather than the stone itself. High-grade lapis with deep blue and clean pyrite can be much more expensive, but most lapis in everyday jewelry is not that grade. So why does lapis still look expensive? Because it carries historical memory. Lapis doesn't just look blue, it looks like the color of empires. It looks like ancient wealth. It looks like something people once crossed deserts to obtain. That's why lapis lazuli earns the number 11 spot. It's not always expensive because it's rare. It often looks expensive because history trained the human brain to treat that blue as priceless. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more high-end in modern jewelry because it doesn't look like ancient royalty. It looks like pure black metal polished into power.
Top 10. Hematite. The stone that looks like black metal but isn't rare. Hematite is one of the most misleading stones in modern jewelry because it doesn't look like a gemstone. It looks like power. Polished hematite has a dark metallic shine, steel gray to mirror black, like a fragment of a weapon or a piece of industrial machinery turned into jewelry. In rings and bracelets, it can look expensive in a very specific way, not luxury like diamonds, but luxury like high-end design, and that's exactly why people overestimate its value. As an archaeology reporter, hematite is a stone I've encountered in places that have nothing to do with fashion. It appears in ancient pigment residues, in early mining sites, and in burial contexts where the color red carried symbolic weight. Because hematite has a secret that makes it historically important, even though it looks black, it leaves a blood red streak. Geographically, hematite is found on nearly every continent. But the most important commercial sources include Brazil, the Lake Superior region in the United States, Australia, South Africa, and India. These are landscapes shaped by ancient oceans and oxygen-rich eras. where iron settled into massive layers long before humans ever existed. That geological history matters, because hematite is not a gemstone deposit in the traditional sense. It's an iron mineral, and in many regions it is extracted as iron ore. Mining hematite is rarely romantic. It is typically recovered through open-pit mining, heavy excavation, crushing, and sorting. In many operations, the goal is industrial, steel production. Jewelry-grade hematite is often selected later. Dense pieces that polish well, with fewer fractures and a cleaner metallic surface. Color is where hematite becomes deceptive. On the surface, it appears metallic black or gunmetal gray, reflecting light like polished steel. But if you scratch it against unglazed ceramic, it leaves a deep red streak, a detail that made ancient cultures associate it with war, sacrifice, and protection. Not because it was mystical, but because it literally marked the ground like dried blood. In shape, hematite is commonly cut into smooth beads, flat discs, sharp geometric forms, and cabochons. It's especially popular in men's jewelry because it looks like metal while still being stone. And because it takes a mirror polish, it can look premium even in cheap settings. Now let's talk price. Hematite jewelry is usually inexpensive. A typical hematite bracelet often sells around $10 to $40. Polished hematite rings are commonly $8 to $25. Even larger statement pieces often remain affordable unless they're set in heavy silver or branded designer work. So why does hematite look expensive? Because it imitates the visual language of control, metal, weight, darkness, and precision. It looks like something engineered, not something mined. It feels like a luxury object even when it isn't. That's why hematite earns the number 10 spot. It doesn't look expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it borrows the face of steel, while quietly reminding us that underneath that black shine, it's still made of iron and ancient blood-colored earth. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more valuable in the human mind, because it doesn't look like metal. It looks like pure fire frozen into orange-red stone. Top 9. Obsidian, the stone that looks like a luxury weapon, but is everywhere. Obsidian is one of the most expensive-looking stones you can hold in your hand, because it doesn't look like a stone at all. It looks like a blade. Polished obsidian is deep black, mirror-smooth, and unnervingly clean, like the surface of a dark lake at night. In jewelry, especially in thick rings, pendants, or sharp geometric cuts, obsidian can look like something futuristic and elite, the kind of material you'd expect to be rare, dangerous, and extremely valuable. But obsidian is often far more common and cheaper than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, obsidian is one of the most important stones in human history, not as decoration, as technology. Before metal weapons existed, obsidian was one of the sharpest materials humans could shape. It was used for knives, arrowheads, surgical tools, and ritual blades. Entire trade networks formed around it because the best obsidian sources became strategic power zones. Geographically, obsidian is found wherever volcanic activity has occurred. Major sources include Mexico, Iceland, Italy, the United States, especially the Pacific Northwest, Japan, Turkey, and parts of East Africa. If a region has volcanic history, it can produce obsidian. That is the first reason it is not rare. Obsidian forms when lava cools so quickly that crystals don't have time to grow. The result is volcanic glass, natural glass, created in moments, not millions of years. That fast formation is what gives obsidian its perfect smoothness and its sharp fracture. Mining obsidian is often closer to surface collection than traditional gem mining. In many regions, obsidian occurs in flows, nodules, and exposed outcrops. It can be collected, quarried, and cut in large quantities. Some operations use open-pit methods, but because obsidian is often already exposed, it can be recovered relatively easily compared to deep-vein gemstones. Color is usually jet black, but obsidian can also appear as brown, mahogany, snowflake, rainbow, or sheen obsidian, depending on internal inclusions and microbubbles. The classic black variety is the one most used in jewelry because it delivers the strongest luxury weapon illusion. Under polish, it reflects like a mirror, making it look like a premium engineered material rather than a natural stone. In shape, obsidian is most commonly cut into cabochons, flat ovals, beads, and sharp modern forms. It is rarely faceted because it's not about sparkle, it's about surface. Many obsidian pieces are deliberately cut with clean edges and minimal design because the stone already looks like high-end black glass. Now, let's talk price. Obsidian jewelry is usually affordable. Bracelets commonly sell around $10 to $35. Pendants often sit between $12 and $60. Rings are typically $15 to $80, depending mostly on the metal and craftsmanship. Even larger statement pieces remain accessible because the raw material is widely available. So why does obsidian look expensive? Because it carries the visual language of danger and precision. It looks like something sharp, controlled, and elite. It looks like a luxury material used in weapons, not ornaments. That's why obsidian earns the number 9 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it resembles technology, black glass polished into power. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more valuable in photos, because it doesn't look like glass. It looks like a gemstone made of pure, glowing orange fire. Top 8. Tiger's Eye. The gold-brown stone that looks like a luxury watch, but isn't. Tiger's Eye is one of the most expensive-looking stones in the everyday jewelry world because it doesn't just have color, it has movement. When you tilt a polished tiger's eye, a bright band of light slides across the surface like a spotlight, almost like the reflection you see on a luxury watch face. In bracelets and rings, it can look like a high-end stone chosen for power, confidence, and status. But tiger's eye is usually far more affordable than people expect. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans have always been drawn to stones that appear alive. In ancient artifacts, the most prized materials were often the ones that shifted, reflected, or behaved like metal. Tiger's eye triggers that same instinct. It doesn't sparkle like a diamond, it flashes like something engineered. Geographically, tiger's eye is found in several key regions. Major sources include South Africa, especially the Northern Cape, along with Australia, India, Namibia, and parts of the United States. It forms in metamorphic environments where silica replaces fibrous minerals, creating the structure responsible for its signature optical effect. Mining tiger's eye is typically done through open-pit extraction and quarry-style removal. The stone often occurs in large seams and bands, meaning it can be extracted in sizable blocks rather than tiny crystals. That availability is one of the main reasons tiger's eye remains affordable. Once a deposit is active, it can produce a large supply of jewelry-grade material. Color is where tiger's eye earns its luxury reputation. The classic variety shows warm golden-brown tones with darker stripes and a bright moving sheen called chatoyancy. Some pieces are more honey-colored. Others are deeper brown. There are also variations like red tiger's eye and blue tiger's eye, but the gold-brown type is the most iconic because it looks like metal under polish. In shape, tiger's eye is most commonly cut into smooth beads, cabochons, thick ovals, and statement pendants. It is rarely faceted because the optical effect works best on a curved surface. A domed cabochon acts like a stage for the moving light band, making the stone look more expensive than it is. Now let's talk price. Tiger's eye jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $10 to $35. Pendants often sit between $12 and $60. Rings are typically $15 to $90, depending mostly on the metal and craftsmanship. Even large tiger's eye pieces can remain affordable because the stone is mined in large quantities. So why does tiger's eye look expensive? Because it imitates the visual language of luxury objects: gold tones, polished surface, controlled reflection, and movement. It doesn't look like a raw mineral, it looks like a finished product. That's why tiger's eye earns the number 8 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it behaves like a luxury material, metal-like, precise, and alive under light. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more high-end in photos. Because it doesn't flash like gold. It glows like a deep red gemstone people constantly confuse with something far more valuable. Top 7. Carnelian, the stone that looks like ruby fire, but costs almost nothing. Carnelian is one of the oldest, expensive-looking stones humans have ever worn. And it's also one of the most misunderstood, because in the right cut, polished smooth, glowing orange-red, set in gold, carnelian can look like a gemstone that should be rare. It can resemble ruby from a distance. It can resemble ancient imperial jewelry. It can even look like something taken from a museum case, but carnelian is usually far more affordable than people assume. As an archaeology reporter, carnelian is a stone I've seen in the ground, not just in jewelry. It appears in ancient trade caches, in bead workshops, in burial goods, and in artifacts that traveled across deserts and oceans. For thousands of years, carnelian wasn't valued because it was scarce. It was valued because it looked like fire. Geographically, carnelian is found in many places, but the most important commercial sources include India, Brazil, Madagascar, Uruguay, and parts of Africa. Historically, India, especially regions like Gujarat, became famous for carnelian bead production, supplying ancient trade networks that reached the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Carnelian is a variety of chalcedony, meaning it forms as microcrystalline quartz. It often occurs in nodules inside volcanic rock or sedimentary deposits. That formation style is one reason it can be produced in large quantities. Mining carnelian is usually done through surface collection, small quarry extraction, and recovery from gravel deposits. In many regions, rough carnelian is dug out in chunks, then sorted by color and translucency. But here's a key detail most buyers never hear. Some carnelian is heat-treated to deepen the orange-red tone. This isn't fake. It's an old practice, and it has been done for centuries. The heat enhances the iron-based color that already exists in the stone. Color is what makes carnelian look expensive. It ranges from warm orange to deep reddish orange, sometimes approaching a red-brown tone. The best pieces are translucent, with an internal glow, like embers under glass. Under indoor lighting, carnelian can look even richer, and in photos, it can appear far more precious than it really is. In shape, carnelian is most commonly cut into smooth beads, cabochons, thick ovals, and seal-style stones. This is historically accurate. Carnelian was one of the most carved gemstones in the ancient world because it's hard enough to hold detail but easy enough to work. In modern jewelry, carnelian often appears as bold statement rings and pendants because the material is available in large pieces. Now let's talk price. Carnelian jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $10 to $35. Pendants often sit between $12 and $60. Rings are typically $15 to $90, depending mostly on the metal and craftsmanship. Even large carnelian stones remain affordable because the supply is wide and the stone is easy to cut. So why does carnelian look like it should cost more? Because it carries one of the strongest luxury signals in human culture. Glowing red-orange. It looks like fire trapped in stone. It looks like the kind of gem ancient rulers would have worn, because many of them actually did. That's why carnelian earns the number 7 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because history taught us to associate warm red stones with power. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more expensive because it doesn't look like fire. It looks like pure crystal, so clear that people mistake it for something far rarer than it is. Top 6. Aventurine, the stone that looks like emerald dust but is mass-produced by nature. Aventurine is one of the most deceptive stones on this list because it looks like it contains money. Not metaphorically, literally. A polished piece of green aventurine can shimmer with tiny sparkles, like gold dust suspended inside green stone. In jewelry, especially in beads and cabochons, It can look like a premium gem, the kind of green stone people assume must be rare, expensive, and difficult to obtain. But aventurine is usually extremely affordable. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that humans instinctively treat green as value. Across cultures, green stones were tied to life, growth, wealth, and protection. And when a green stone also sparkles, when it looks like it contains metallic light, the brain makes a simple mistake. It assumes rarity. Geographically, aventurine is found in many regions. Major sources include India, Brazil, Russia, Tanzania, and parts of the United States. It is a variety of quartz, which means it forms in environments where silica is abundant, which is almost everywhere on Earth. That alone tells you something important. Aventurine is not rare in the way emerald is rare. Mining aventurine is usually done through quarry-style extraction and open-pit operations, often alongside other quartz materials. It occurs in large masses, not tiny crystals, which means it can be removed in blocks, cut into slabs, and processed at scale. In many markets, aventurine is sold in huge volumes because the supply is steady and the material is easy to work with. Color is what gives aventurine its expensive illusion. The classic variety is green, colored by tiny inclusions, often fuchsite mica, that create the shimmering effect known as aventurescence. Some pieces look like smooth green jade. Others look like green stone filled with glitter. Under strong light, the shimmer becomes more visible, and the stone can look far more premium than it really is. Aventurine can also appear in other colors, orange, blue, brown, but green is the one that sells the luxury illusion most strongly because it overlaps visually with emerald and jade. In shape, aventurine is commonly cut into beads, smooth cabochons, thick ovals, pendants, and bracelets. It is rarely faceted because its beauty is not in brilliance, it's in surface glow. The best cuts are wide and polished, allowing the shimmer to spread evenly across the stone like a metallic mist. Now let's talk price. Aventurine jewelry is usually cheap. Bracelets commonly sell around $8 to $25. Pendants often sit between $10 and $40. Rings are typically $12 to $60, depending mostly on the setting. Even large aventurine statement pieces remain affordable because the raw material is abundant and widely available. So why does aventurine look expensive? Because it mimics two luxury signals at once: green wealth color and internal sparkle. It looks like emerald mixed with gold dust. It looks like a gemstone designed by a jeweler, but it isn't. It's quartz, one of the most common mineral families on Earth, wearing a luxury costume. That's why aventurine earns the number 6 spot. It's not rare, it just looks like a stone that should be. And next on this list, we're moving into a gem that looks even more expensive to most people. Because it doesn't shimmer like gold, it looks like pure purple royalty. Top 5. Amethyst. The purple gem that looks like royalty, but is everywhere. Amethyst is one of the most expensive-looking stones in the entire gemstone world because purple has always meant one thing to humans: power. For centuries, purple was the color of emperors, bishops, and dynasties. It was the color people literally couldn't afford. So when you see a deep purple gemstone set into jewelry, especially in gold, it triggers an automatic assumption. This must be rare. This must be expensive. But amethyst, in most of the modern market, is neither. As an archaeology reporter, amethyst is a stone I've seen in places that reveal its true identity: ancient rings, carved seals, religious artifacts, and burial goods. In the Roman world and medieval Europe, amethyst was treated like a high-status gemstone. It was worn by elites. It was placed into sacred objects. It carried authority not because of science, but because purple was psychologically untouchable. Geographically, amethyst is found in many regions, but the largest commercial sources today include Brazil, Uruguay, Zambia, Madagascar, and parts of Russia. Brazil and Uruguay are especially important because they produce massive quantities of amethyst in geodes, large hollow rocks lined with purple crystals. That formation style matters. because it means amethyst can occur in enormous deposits. It is not extracted as tiny, rare crystals. It is often extracted in bulk. Mining amethyst is usually done through open-pit operations and quarry-style excavation, especially in areas where geode-bearing basalt is present. Workers remove rock, split open geodes, then sort crystals by color and clarity. The process is direct, scalable, and capable of producing huge supply, one of the main reasons commercial amethyst remains affordable. Color is what gives amethyst its expensive illusion. It ranges from pale lavender to deep royal purple. The best stones show rich saturation with flashes of red or blue depending on lighting. But here's the detail most buyers don't realize. A large percentage of amethyst in jewelry is mid-grade. Still beautiful, still purple, but not rare. Under indoor lighting, even mid-grade stones can look far more expensive than they really are. In shape, amethyst is commonly cut into faceted ovals, cushions, rounds, and emerald cuts. Unlike many stones on this list, amethyst is transparent enough to be faceted beautifully, which increases its high-end appearance. You'll also see it as cabochons and beads, but faceted amethyst is where the luxury illusion becomes strongest, because it looks like a precious gemstone should. Now, let's talk price. Commercial amethyst jewelry is often affordable. Rings commonly sell around $40 to $180, depending on the setting and stone size. Pendants often sit between $30 and $150. Small amethyst earrings can be $25 to $120. Even larger stones can remain accessible because supply is strong and consistent. High-end amethyst exists, especially deep Siberian color stones, but most amethyst sold in everyday jewelry is not that grade. So why does amethyst still look expensive? Because it wears the face of royal history. It carries the color of authority. It looks like something ancient elites would have fought to own, because for centuries they did. That's why amethyst earns the number 5 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because the human mind still treats purple as power. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks even more expensive in a completely different way. Because it doesn't look like royalty. It looks like pure crystal, so clear that people mistake it for something far rarer than it is. Top 4. Clear Quartz. The stone that looks like a diamond, but is one of Earth's most common minerals. Clear quartz is one of the most deceptive stones in jewelry because it can look like a high-end gemstone without even trying. In the right cut, a clear quartz stone can resemble diamond, white sapphire, even high-grade crystal jewelry. It can look clean, sharp, and expensive, especially when it's faceted and set into silver or white gold. In photos, many people can't tell the difference at a glance. But clear quartz, also called rock crystal, is one of the most common minerals on Earth. As an archaeology reporter, quartz is a stone I've seen everywhere. In ancient tools, in ritual objects, in trade items, and in the raw geology beneath entire civilizations. Long before diamonds became the symbol of wealth, quartz was one of the first minerals humans learned to shape and trust. It wasn't worn because it was rare. It was worn because it looked like frozen clarity, like something pure and permanent. Geographically, clear quartz is found worldwide. Major sources include Brazil, Madagascar, the United States, Russia, China, and many parts of Africa. Quartz forms in an enormous range of environments: igneous rocks, metamorphic zones, hydrothermal veins, and even sedimentary deposits. That versatility is exactly why it is everywhere. Mining clear quartz is typically done through open-pit operations, quarry-style extraction, and recovery from hydrothermal veins. In many regions, quartz is mined in large quantities alongside other minerals. The best jewelry-grade pieces are selected after extraction, stones that are clean, transparent, and free from heavy fractures. But because quartz is abundant, the market can always find more. Color is where clear quartz becomes powerful. It's colorless, transparent, and can appear almost liquid when polished. Under bright light, it reflects and flashes enough to imitate more expensive stones, especially to viewers watching on a phone screen or TV. That's why clear quartz performs so well in jewelry photography. It looks like high-end clarity. In shape, clear quartz is often cut into faceted ovals, rounds, emerald cuts, and brilliant cuts. It is also sold as smooth cabochons, beads, and carved forms. Because quartz is hard enough for jewelry and takes a good polish, it can be shaped into styles that mimic luxury gemstones almost perfectly. Now, let's talk price. Clear quartz jewelry is usually affordable. Faceted quartz rings commonly sell around $25 to $120, depending on the setting. Pendants often sit between $20 and $90. Bracelets can be $12 to $50. Even larger stones remain accessible because the raw material is abundant and the cutting cost is relatively low. So, why does clear quartz look expensive? Because it imitates the most powerful luxury signal in gemstones: pure clarity. The human brain reads clear, brilliant, colorless stone as diamond by default, especially in photos and quick viewing. That's why clear quartz earns the number 4 spot. It's not expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it borrows the visual identity of the most famous gem on Earth. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks expensive for the opposite reason. Because it isn't clear at all. It's soft, pink, and looks like it belongs in high-end minimalist jewelry. Top 3. Rose Quartz. The soft pink stone that looks like luxury minimalism, but is everywhere. Rose quartz is one of the most expensive-looking stones in modern jewelry, not because it shines, but because it looks like taste. It has that soft, calm pink that feels premium by default, like designer skincare packaging, high-end interior decor, or boutique minimalist jewelry. When rose quartz is polished into a clean cabochon or smooth beads and set in gold, it can look like a stone chosen by someone with money. But rose quartz is one of the most widely available gemstones on Earth. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that the most powerful stones aren't always the rare ones. Sometimes they're the ones that match the aesthetic of the era. And right now, rose quartz fits perfectly into the modern luxury language. Soft color, clean surface, calm emotion. It looks expensive because it looks curated. Geographically, rose quartz is found in many regions worldwide. Major sources include Brazil, Madagascar, South Africa, India, and parts of the United States. It forms in pegmatites, large, coarse-grained igneous rocks where quartz can grow in massive amounts. That matters because rose quartz often occurs not as tiny crystals, but as large blocks, meaning the supply can be enormous. Mining rose quartz is typically done through open-pit extraction and quarry-style removal in pegmatite zones. It's extracted in chunks, cut into slabs, and sorted for color quality. Because it is abundant and easy to extract compared to many gems, rose quartz can enter the market in large quantities. Color is the entire reason rose quartz looks expensive. It ranges from pale blush pink to deeper milky rose tones. Most rose quartz is translucent to opaque, with a soft, cloudy glow rather than sparkle. Under warm light, it can look smoother and richer. Under daylight, it often appears gentle and natural. This is exactly why it photographs so well. It doesn't need brilliance. It sells mood. In shape, rose quartz is most commonly cut into cabochons, beads, flat ovals, and statement pendants. It is also carved into hearts, spheres, and smooth minimalist forms because it's easy to shape and polish. Faceting is rare because the stone usually doesn't have the clarity needed for sparkle. Its luxury effect comes from surface purity and color softness. Now let's talk price. Rose quartz jewelry is usually inexpensive. Bracelets commonly sell around $8 to $25. Pendants often sit between $10 and $50. Rings are typically $12 to $70, depending mostly on the setting. Even large rose quartz statement pieces remain affordable because the raw material is abundant and widely available. So why does it look expensive? Because rose quartz mimics the modern language of luxury: Softness, minimalism, calm emotion, and clean design. It looks like something you'd see in a boutique, even when it was cut from a massive deposit that could supply the world for decades. That's why Rose Quartz earns the number 3 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it matches the aesthetic of wealth. And next on this list, we're moving into a stone that looks expensive for a completely different reason, because it doesn't look soft at all. It looks like smoky, polished power, like a gemstone version of dark glass. Top 2. Smoky Quartz. The dark luxury gem that looks like designer glass, but is extremely common. Smoky Quartz is one of the most expensive-looking stones you can wear because it doesn't look like a typical gemstone, it looks like luxury design. A good smoky quartz has that deep transparent brown, sometimes almost black, like tinted glass in a high-end car or the dark crystal panels you see in expensive architecture. When it's faceted and set in gold, smoky quartz can look like a premium collector stone, clean, mature, serious, but smoky quartz is one of the most common gem-quality minerals on Earth. As an archaeology reporter, I've seen smoky quartz in contexts that reveal its real identity. It appears in ancient bead sites, in early trade material, and in the raw geology beneath mountain civilizations. Quartz has always been available. What changes is how humans interpret it. Smoky quartz looks expensive because it carries the visual language of modern wealth: dark transparency, polished surfaces, and controlled elegance. Geographically, smoky quartz is found worldwide. Major sources include Brazil, Madagascar, Switzerland, historically famous alpine material, Scotland, the United States, and parts of Russia. Smoky quartz forms in many environments, but it's especially common in pegmatites and hydrothermal veins, places where quartz grows in large, clear crystals. Mining smoky quartz is typically done through open-pit extraction, quarry-style digging, and recovery from crystal-bearing veins. In many regions, smoky quartz is extracted alongside clear quartz and other pegmatite minerals. Because quartz deposits can produce huge crystals, the supply of smoky quartz can be enormous, large enough to cut into big jewelry stones without scarcity pressure. Color is what gives smoky quartz its expensive illusion. It ranges from pale champagne brown to deep smoky brown, and in the darkest stones, it can appear nearly black while still remaining transparent. That transparency is critical. It gives smoky quartz the designer gem look, like a stone chosen for style, not for tradition. Under indoor lighting, smoky quartz can look even darker and more expensive. In photos, it often resembles much rarer stones. In shape, smoky quartz is commonly cut into faceted ovals, cushions, emerald cuts, and large statement stones. It is one of the best stones for big, clean cuts because it often occurs in large crystals and holds polish extremely well. You'll also see smoky quartz in beads and cabochons, but faceted cuts are where it looks most premium. Now let's talk price. Smoky quartz jewelry is usually affordable. Rings commonly sell around $30 to $160, depending on size and setting. Pendants often sit between $25 and $140. Earrings can be $20 to $120. Even large smoky quartz stones remain accessible because the raw material is abundant and the cutting cost is manageable. So why does smoky quartz look expensive? Because it imitates the aesthetics of modern luxury: dark glass, clean geometry, and understated power. It doesn't need sparkle, it needs presence. That's why smoky quartz earns the number 2 spot. It isn't expensive because it's rare. It looks expensive because it wears the style of wealth perfectly. And next on this list, we reach the number 1 stone, the most deceptive, looks expensive but isn't, gemstone of all. A stone that people buy thinking it's a high-end gem, when in reality, it's often something else entirely. Top 1. Citrine, the golden gem. Everyone thinks is rare, but usually isn't even citrine. Citrine is one of the most expensive-looking stones in the jewelry world because it wears the color of wealth: warm golden yellow, honey tones, sunlight trapped in crystal, In photos, citrine can look like a gemstone meant for high-end collectors, like a softer golden version of topaz or even a warm sapphire. Set in gold, it can look like the kind of stone you'd expect to cost far more than it does. But citrine is the #1 stone on this list for a reason. Because in the modern jewelry market, most citrine isn't actually citrine. As an archaeology reporter, I've learned that the most powerful illusions in history are not created by lies, they're created by labels, by names people trust, by assumptions that survive for generations. Citrine is exactly that kind of stone. The name sounds precious, the color looks expensive, and the public rarely questions it. Geographically, natural citrine does exist. Real citrine is found in places like Brazil, Madagascar, parts of Russia, and scattered deposits in other quartz-rich regions. But natural citrine in clean, attractive golden color is not produced in the same massive quantities as what jewelry stores sell. Because most commercial citrine comes from somewhere else entirely, amethyst. Amethyst, purple quartz, forms in huge deposits, especially in Brazil and Uruguay. And when certain amethyst is heated, the purple can shift into yellow, orange, or brownish gold. This practice has been used for a long time, and it produces the color the market demands. Mining citrine, in most cases, is really mining amethyst geodes. Workers extract large crystal deposits through open-pit quarrying and excavation, split the geodes, sort the amethyst, then heat-treat selected material to create the golden tones that sell as citrine. The process is scalable, reliable, and profitable, which is why the market is flooded with it. Color is where the illusion becomes almost perfect. Natural citrine usually shows a softer champagne to lemon yellow tone, often more subtle and less orange. Heat-treated amethyst frequently shows a stronger golden orange or even burnt caramel color, sometimes with a reddish base. Under store lighting, that richer tone looks more expensive. It looks like luxury gold, but it's also a clue. In shape, citrine is commonly cut into faceted ovals, cushions, emerald cuts, and large statement stones. Quartz is easy to cut, polishes beautifully, and can be produced in big sizes. That's why citrine jewelry often features large center stones, something that would be extremely expensive if it were sapphire or diamond. Now let's talk price. Most commercial citrine jewelry is affordable. Rings commonly sell around $30 to $180, depending on the setting. Pendants often sit between $25 and $140. Earrings can be $20 to $120. Even large stones remain accessible because quartz supply is enormous, and heat treatment keeps the citrine look available at scale. So why does citrine look expensive? Because it wears the color of gold. And because the market quietly trained people to accept a heat-treated substitute as the default version of the stone. That's why citrine earns the #1 spot. Not because it's fake, but because it's the clearest example of how a gemstone can look expensive, while being one of the most mass-produced illusions in modern jewelry. And if you've ever owned citrine, here's the question that changes everything. Did you actually own citrine? Or did you own a heated piece of amethyst wearing a golden name?